Becky the Live. Alrighty. Good morning. It is Friday, September 30th, 2022. This is episode 32 of Maker That Money. I am Pooch of Repkord, and with me, my partner in crime, Mr. Andrew Mayhall of 3D Gloop. Andrew, how are you doing this fine Friday?
I'm doing great. I'm feeling energized, ready to go. I'm excited for that East Coast Rep Festival coming up. So
You
we
sound
got like
energized.
5 days until we leave.
Oh, I'm
So
so excited.
pressure's on.
For those of you who don't know what ERF is, that's the East Coast Rep Festival. Andrew just mentioned it is a 3D printing mecca of sorts. Everybody shows up, shows off their latest and greatest 3D printing related stuff. Rep is the term for what is it? It's not a portmanteau. What do they call it? Where it's like rapid replication. It's kind of a backwards
Yeah.
abbreviation for rapid replication. The idea that you make a 3D printer to print parts to make more 3D printers. That's it. But anyway, Maker That Money. This podcast is the show where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. So we are big fans of the maker entrepreneur movement. We like to talk about our journey along the way. I'm about 6 years into my small business venture with Repkord. We produce fine filament furniture and 3D printing accessories. And Andrew is the king of the empire of sticky and makes adhesives in the name of that are designed for 3D printing, adhering 3D printed parts together. So that's what we do. Greetings to everybody that's with us on YouTube this morning in the chat. We record every Friday at just about every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. And we hope if you're listening back after the fact that you consider joining us live sometime. We do take questions and comments from the chat on a regular basis. We also have the Maker That Money hotline above us for those that are brave enough to call in and chat in person with us. We do love hearing your sweet, sweet voices from time to time. If you're feeling brave and want to join us for that, feel free. Today on the pod, we are going to talk about product maturity. Andrew, tell the people what we're going to get into when we start on product maturity. What does that mean to you?
Well, so it means more so in general, it's part of the product development or product life cycle of, things in general. There's 4 really distinct stages of products, and product maturity is kind of one of the latter stages. And that's where you see really big growth or just, slightly after really big growth, but where, this becomes like house name stuff, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's obviously, it's funny because as makers, we would probably say, well, nothing's ever done, right? It's like we constantly want to if I could just do this and do that, and we've talked about that in the past, right? The shiny object syndrome, this desire to just kind of keep on iterating and stuff like that. But at some point, you hope to reach some level of stability where that change tapers off. You reach kind of a critical mass of sales, and it becomes a nice little cash flow generator for you. That's the idea in my mind, right?
Yep.
We're investing all this time and energy into R&D and product development in the hopes that we will reach that point. And I think this might be a sticking point for some people that are new to the game, where you have that throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks phenomenon, where you're like, well, I'm gonna try this, I'm gonna try this and try this, and you're never really capturing all of that IP and that development time and that R&D money you've spent, right? And so this is where that balance between focus and casting a wide net is such a tough thing. We have this inherent desire. I'm speaking in generalities, guys. I know it's not everybody, but it's like, we are very distractible individuals as makers a lot of the time. We go out there and we want to do all the things, make all the things, right? Make all the things.
Yep.
And that is very counterproductive to actually running a sustainable business a lot of the time, right?
Yeah.
Because you have too many irons in the fire. We're going through it now. I'm always going through it. I always say Maker Pooch is constantly at odds with Business Pooch, right? Because the things that I want to do that are fun and interesting are not those that are, necessarily always making us money. So,
Mm-hmm.
to speak to the conflict on your end, right? Because I know you go down rabbit
Oh,
holes as well. I mean, we all do. That's normal, right?
yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. So, we've always had, some struggles like 3D Gloop. We like to say we're an R&D company, internally, because a large portion of our revenue actually goes into new product development. And while we haven't been releasing new products, we've constantly been tweaking our formulas, we've constantly been iterating, we've constantly been doing all of this work to make our products better and potentially release some new products.
Right.
And as you were mentioning that shiny object syndrome, we constantly get stuck in that. It's like we start chasing down a thing, and so yeah, we're constantly at odds internally here. But one thing that I think we've done really well up to this point is with our adhesive line, we've chosen to kind of take a step back and say, okay, what can we do to start producing this in higher and higher volumes, turning on essentially, I mentioned this in the last episode, that widget factory. So we have a widget, or we have in this case an adhesive, and we need to figure out how do we scale this, how do we reduce the cost for the manufacturing, how do we increase its production, its yields, everything else, and get it out the door as quickly as possible. And that's part
Right.
of that product maturity stage, right? As we're hitting some sort of finalization, design lock, and now we're going through the growth, and then eventually hopefully establishing this is set in stone.
Mm, yeah. So let's pin that for a sec. That's product
Hmm.
maturity in a nutshell as we define it. Let us know in
Yeah.
the chat if you understand it to mean something else, or you have questions around or thoughts around what that is. But last weekend we were remiss for skipping our wins, and I don't want to skip our
Oh,
wins. Okay,
all right.
there is a lot of things that you as a business will go through that
Hmm.
just feel like a drag every week, right? We constantly say, "How is it
Hmm.
Friday again already?" and all this stuff.
Oh.
And it is very, very important to, like I've said in the past, one, have a good accounting of what you've actually achieved, because I think we're always
Hmm.
very hard on ourselves. But two, let's think, like, spend some time to reflect on the positive things that happen, because whether you're a content creator or a maker, hobbyist or a business owner, we mentally do not focus on that stuff enough. It is a big problem, in my opinion. We think about it, guys. When you're looking, if you're a streamer, those negative comments that dig at you in the chat and all those things. Those things are taking up space rent free in your head way more than
Hmm.
like you just being elated about all the good stuff. I'm not saying never, but I think that that's a problem that we seem to deal with in this day and age. So let's talk wins for a second, can we, Andrew? I know
Yes.
you've got some good ones. You've been really happy sharing some
Oh.
details about some stuff you've developed, right?
Yeah, yeah. So big wins for us. We are hopefully going to tease and well, it's a little bit more of a tease, but introduce our retail packaging. It's not finalized, but we're going to introduce it at Earth, and we've got our first kind of low volume production quality production run. So a big win for us was getting the thermoformed inserts ready to be installed into the retail packaging, and out the door, and then along with that, like all of the prep that we've been putting in to get to Earth, it's finally all starting to come together, and I feel like we're finally starting to move that big old flywheel.
Listen, guys,
So
I can't tell you how unbelievably happy I am for you for this, because you've been talking about this
uh
for years, like since I've known you, and just to see you get this
yes.
across the finish line has been just a rewarding part of being your friend and just
Yeah.
a colleague in a lot of this stuff. And uh there was like no shortage of challenges that you had. I mean, it's a real understatement to if you heard the backstory around all the things, all
Oh.
the hurdles, all the false starts and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
what I think is particularly rewarding about your story here is that ultimately you just decided, I'm going to take this matters into my own hands, because
Hmm.
you tried to have vendors help you with it, and you started, and then things didn't, you're taking step,
Yep.
like everything, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And ultimately you just said, you know what, grabbed onto this thing, I'm going to
Yep.
make it myself, because it is a major blocker for
Yep.
getting our product physically to market, right? This is your retail
Literally.
packaging. You have brick and mortar stores that are waiting for this product, and you need this in order to sell in brick and mortar, right? Because
That is correct.
it meets the standards by which safety standards by which like DOT transportation can happen for adhesives and stuff. Like there are a lot of things
A
here,
lot.
right.
Yeah.
And so you know, in true maker fashion, grabbed that bull by the horns and said, "I'm tired of waiting. I'm just gonna."
I was tired. Yep.
And that's gonna pay massive dividends for you, and just massive.
I'm excited. I'm excited, and you know, again, like this is you know, I keep telling myself, it's like, okay, this is the first production run of it. Like, there's still a lot of problems to figure out, but man, like it was rewarding. Literally, it was on. I think it was on Tuesday this week. I crossed that finish line where I had just enough to make retail packaging available for Earth. And so it was like, there we go. I've crossed the finish line. I'm in the clear now. Every little bit that I make further from now on is just setting me up for, better and better success or better tuning of the things that we had to do to get there. So a massive win. I was just there was a smile on my face the entire day.
And guys, if you're coming to Earth, this is a teaser, but he may be bringing some tech that he had to custom develop in order to get this thing done, and it is impressive. It is impressive. So maybe ask him about that. You might get a behind the scenes tour of the tool set that he had to use to get this thing done. Really cool stuff. Maybe we'll go in a little deeper after the fact, have a little presentation on a future episode or something like that, because it's a neat piece of gear. On my front, my wins, like they often do, started with some massive losses. One of which being, for those of you who follow along on Twitter, our Twitter handles are down below. We are both very prolific tweeters, and that's a great way to interact with us if you want to. I am at Repkord, Repkord, and Andrew is at 3D Gloop. But I shared, let's see, this would have been, what was it, this month? It feels like an eternity ago already.
Yeah.
It was actually I want to think it was last Monday. We had a massive fire inside one of our laser cutters, and it brought that machine down for a lot longer than I had hoped. Mostly because when I brought it back online, I needed it to be better, safer, stronger, faster. Stronger, faster, cue the music for that. But cue the Daft Punk. But it was a setback. It was a moment where I was just like, oh, you're questioning everything, like we're doing great. I don't have the time to be basically rebuilding a laser cutter right now. But we don't have any other choice because we've got orders backlogged. We're trying to get stuff done for Earth, and future trade shows and stuff like that. And that technical debt was coming home to roost in a big way. I mean, honestly, the fire was as a result of us probably shortcutting some stuff. Some of it we didn't know. Some of it was just like, well, it's good enough. But our safety systems were relying maybe a little bit too heavily on just physical monitoring and proximity. The challenge with laser cutting is, though, you cannot, guys, leave those things unattended the way that I think we grow a cut. And when I say that, I mean, it only takes a few seconds for things to be burning for a lot of damage to happen. So we'd burned out the inside of this. I mean, the entire inside. Thankfully, this was an enclosed frame laser cutter. And the whole thing just looked like a bombed out car or whatever, like just soot all over everything, melted a bunch of the wiring and the air lines that, add air assist to the cut and all that stuff. Like there was just molten whatever the corium equivalent of plastics is in the tray, where it's just a hodgepodge of melted plastics and sawdust, in the bin. Just gross, nasty stuff.
Terrible.
It was really bad. It stunk. And I was just like, oh my gosh. But from that, like a phoenix out of the ashes, the literal ashes, we've developed some new air scrubbing systems, some new filtration, some new part catching, some new cutting stuff, some new safety standards and alarm systems. A lot. Like there's still probably 20 or 30 different like mods that I've got that are just taking our operation to the next level. So
That's
ultimately
awesome.
we will be in a much better place. But it was an inflection point for me, as like we often encounter, where you I was chatting with somebody earlier on, and it seems like as a maker entrepreneur, you're constantly skirting the lines between doubling down and giving up entirely. There's like not really a lot of in between, right? It's like I need to
Yep.
reinvest and go bigger or go
Yep.
home, right? That's the go big or
Yep.
go home aspect. But we do exist in the middle and stuff. So it was like, okay, well, look, if we're gonna leverage a lot of that time and energy spent in getting this set up the way that we need to keep
Hmm.
pushing. And we are in a better place. I'm really happy with the proof of concept for our new bed support system. Just some small things in talking to my ops director. He had a great idea about just redo the firmware so the origin for the part is better aligned over the deeper part of the catch bin. Because part of the problem is the fire happened because it ignited some bits in the waste bin where the catch bin is tapered, and so the parts were closer to where the laser is more intense. Ignited
Hmm.
some acrylic that was in the tray, and then kind of propagated through the ventilation system, just kind of sucked in, and then we had a lot of bits down line that
Oh.
we didn't know. Basically melted the entire vinyl tubing setup that but was part of the fume extracting. It's a big
Oh.
thing. It's a big thing.
Yeah.
But the end of it, we ended up in a better place, and I'm in a much better
Well, that's
place
awesome.
about it. I'm way
That's
further
awesome.
behind, and we're not going to be able to do as much stuff and have as much stuff for the trade show because we
Oh,
put that off.
yeah.
But you know what? I don't care. At this point, a lot of the value of those things is getting out there, seeing all you beautiful people,
Yep.
interacting, and we just do the best we can, keep marching forward. So,
That's awesome.
good batch of wins for the week. I'm sorry for the long story in that regard. But watch,
No, that's great. I mean, it's
yeah.
good to share these things because I feel like so many times I get stuck in, it's like, oh, all of these problems that I'm having. But, hearing other people and how they overcame those problems, I think it's inspiring too. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So in another double down fashion, we ended up picking up another laser. So it's like
oh, man.
we're basically positioning ourselves the same way we do with belt printing and stuff like that. And like you, it's like we really, in order to do what we do, we've had to
Hmm.
refine our tool set to meet what we
Hmm.
need, because at industrial standards, when we talk about industrial machines, I know that term gets thrown around all the time. When I think of
Hmm.
industrial, I think heavily customized, honestly, because
Sure.
it is so particular to what it is that you are making, that to be able to
Hmm.
buy something off the shelf, you can buy something that'll probably get you 80% of the way there, which I would say our
Yeah.
standard 3D printers and laser cutters and stuff do. But it's
Hmm.
that last 20% that really can get you to
Hmm.
maximize your efficiency and profitability. And when you're talking about labor and time, that's an
Sure.
important
Yeah.
that's an important 20% to chip away at. I don't think you're ever going
Hmm.
to get 100% of the way there, because there's always little things.
Yeah.
But and there's little lessons along the way. I always say we're lucky that we have these little reminders that, as much as it sucks at the time, are really not that big of a deal. Like, thankfully we didn't set fire to the entire
Hmm.
shop. Like, it can always be worse, right? Like, nobody
Sure.
got hurt.
Yep.
Okay, good reminder. We can't be shortcutting these things. How do we improve? How do we get to a better place? So,
Yeah.
trying to have that mindset, trying to appreciate that this is just the universe giving you a little heads up that
Yep.
technical debt is gonna come and bite you if you put
Yep.
off doing the things that you need to do, guys. If you don't know what technical debt is, we did an episode on it a couple back. Look it up in the back catalog. Good
Yeah.
episode. Great thing to be aware of as a maker, business owner, and
Hmm.
all that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, Announcements. I'm going to pause for a quick second and say call to action. If you haven't already, please smash that like button. Consider subscribing if this is content that you appreciate. Go out and tell a friend. Bring a friend next time if you'd like. If you think this is good stuff, tweet about us if you can. That's always helpful.
Be awesome.
We love seeing your shining faces in the chat and hearing your voices on the hotline. So that's great. I do want to say housekeeping for next week. I'll announce it now, and I'll announce it at the end as well. We're going to be at Earth. So our regular time, we're not going to be on Friday. We're going to be on Sunday recording live from Earth. I probably won't have it posted though until mid next week, like being realistic and when I get home and all that stuff. But one of our favorite guests on the pod, Clayton from, you may know him as Uncle Jesse for real, the king of resin. He's a massive hustler himself. Every time I chat with him, he's got something new. He's doing some print farming. He's got his hands. Very talented guy. He's going to be joining us live at Earth, and we're going to record from the maker stage. So that's going to be fun. We're doing that on Sunday. If you're going to be at Earth, be part of the live studio audience. Join us for that. That'll be fun. And you have an opportunity to ask questions or share comments and stuff from there. So that'll be great. We look forward to that. Okay, I know that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah.
Are you ready? Are you ready for some more meat and potatoes and talking about product and product maturity and
Let's
let these
dig
people
in.
give the people what they came for? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. David. Hey, good to see you, David Tobin in the chat, producer for 3D Maker. 3D printing nerd. You'd think I'd know that by now. Good to see you. No, we're not going to go live, just because I don't want to bring all the gear for that. But, well, technically, Earth will be live streaming. So if you just watch in the Earth feed, you could watch us record live. I don't know what the quality of the audio. You could watch us record live. I don't know what the quality of the audio and all that stuff will be. But that is an option if you do want to tune in live for any of the sessions. And I've seen a sneak peek of the program. It's going to be awesome. Like a lot of really amazing people talking about a lot of really amazing stuff. I seriously, I saw it and I was just like, man, I wish I didn't have to be in my booth because I want to go look at that. So I plan to watch back that stuff. And it's awesome that they're live streaming the whole thing this year. So something to look forward to. So we're kind of counting on them for that. Joseph Prusa in the house. Good to see you, my friend.
That's awesome.
Don't usually get to see you on here, but that's awesome. And I look forward to giving you a big hug and a high five and all that stuff next week. And at some point, we got to get you on here, my friend, because you might know a thing or two about running a business. Okay.
Maybe.
I think this guy has kind of been down this road. I mean, you talk about maker entrepreneur. You know, of all maker entrepreneurs, this guy has done. He and his brother are just awesome dudes, amazing guys. You know, I love a good origin story. So maybe if we're lucky down the road at some point, we can hear about those pain points as, you know, you're taking it from 1 and 2 to 5 to 10 to 20 employees and stuff like that. He's just got such a great story. I've been really lucky to have him as a friend and get to hear about some of that stuff. Very inspirational to me, I'll tell you that. And I'm not just kissing butt here.
Same here.
Anyway, let's talk about product maturity.
Yeah,
let's
talk
about
do
that.
it.
Because we alluded at the top. I think that's the goal, right? And I think that's a goal. It is a goal. It's 100%.
It's a great goal.
It's a great goal. And like I said, the reason that you really want to try to focus on that is because, like we always say, cash is king. Like you need that cash flow to fund your operation, especially as a bootstrap, right? Like you are reliant on that. Is the lifeblood of your business. Okay. And if you are not getting to a level where you are efficiently keeping that cash coming in the door, you don't have, you're dead in the water. You don't have money to buy new gear, pay employees, get new inventory, get new, parts you need and all that stuff, save for a rainy day, get the bigger facility, mission critical stuff. Right. But we were up against the problem that we always are as makers, that scaling to mass production is not sexy to us a lot of the time. So how do you combat that? Like, how do you reward yourself for that success to get to that next level, right? To force yourself to make sure that you're producing and you're doing a good job, iterating. You're going to have your setbacks and all of that stuff, but focus and drive, right? So when you're starting, Andrew, and there's different camps on this. There's no right way, but
there's not.
We hear the notion, do one thing and do it well. What do you think of that?
So that's what I love, and that's really the methodology that I think we subscribe to here at Gloop. Is we've had potential of, oh hey, we could go and do this or we can go and do that, but what we've really focused in on was just doing a few products and doing them as best as we possibly could, and keep iterating on that formula, iterating on just kind of that product in general, get it to a point where we could say, okay, yes, we finalized our widget. Now let's start producing a ton of it. And
Right.
how can we keep producing more and more of it and reducing that cost and scaling effectively?
Yeah.
But I think it might be helpful to actually understand for many people the product life cycle, of your widget, whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
Um, you can kind of go and look this up on the internet, but generally speaking, product lifestyle, you have your
Life cycle.
introduction or introductory phase, and then you'll have your growth phase, and eventually your maturity, and then a decline phase. In the decline phase, there's another little subsection where you can have kind of a reintroduction or a regrowth or a revival, an extension, if you will, of its life cycle.
Okay.
But generally speaking, no product is going to have an indefinite life cycle.
Well,
You're going to introduce something.
let me
Go ahead.
pause let me pause you there for just a sec. That very very good
Hmm.
point, right? That life cycle is the traditional life cycle. However, I would
Hmm.
ask you this. There are absolutely products that are trend based, and then those that are more what we would consider evergreen. Is
Sure.
there a product out there that will always be evergreen, and is that okay?
Sure.
Right? Like, think
Yeah.
about there's probably some commodity products that have been the same way for the past 50 years.
Hmm.
I don't know
Yeah.
how typical that is, and especially in the space that we are, we're not usually talking about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which is why
When you're
we
talking
like,
about technology,
yeah,
you're not really going to have an evergreen product cycle, product probably. Not to say that it can't happen. I think that's the kind of the holy grail, right? Like we want to have products that are evergreen
that's a cash
because now
cow.
we don't have
Yeah,
to, yeah, we don't
yeah,
have to keep spending money on, like marketing and advertising because people know it's kind of like that genericized trademark, if you will. Think like Kleenex or Band-Aid.
right.
These
Rep
things are
box.
like yeah, you know what they are, and it's not like they have to do a bunch of advertising to get there. So
Right.
but yeah, so ultimately there are going to be products like commodity products that are going to be kind of evergreen, where once you've done it and you've established that brand, you've established that dominance, you just have to keep up that momentum, but
Yeah.
it's not nearly as intensive.
Right.
For technology, really what you're doing is you're constantly teetering on the edge of that introduction and growth phase, but
Right.
you're really driving home, like, oh hey, this is better than all of the else, it's the next generation, and you're kind of playing into that constant progressive ness of technology in itself.
Right. So the
What's the
first
next and best?
so the first step is know your product,
Hmm.
define your product, right? So have an
Hmm.
understanding of what life cycle we're talking about. As Andrew said,
Hmm.
if you're in tech, you're irrelevant like 3 months, that cycle may be very, very fast, right? And so when
Hmm.
you're planning out what you want to do, be mindful of what that product life cycle is. Are you riding a trend? If your product is
Hmm.
based on, I don't know, fidget spinners or whatever, something that
Yep.
is like,
Exactly.
there's great opportunity, but you better get while the getting is good and then pivot,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
that's a totally
Exactly.
valid strategy,
Hmm.
right? Especially as makers, and that can be a very good strategy. We have so many tool sets now that allow us to pivot that way,
Hmm.
so that we can ride the wave while it's there, and then when it ramps down, go to do something else. Totally
Hmm.
good strategy. Just be aware of it and know,
Hmm.
and then try to set some indicators or some bumpers for yourself along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things that we've talked about a bunch here on this podcast is really the MVP, right? And again, maker entrepreneurs taking this next step into becoming, potential, business owners.
Right.
Uh, you know, um, Basically, we entrepreneurs have essentially the most to lose. We are bringing new products in an introductory stage.
Yep.
They might not be tested. We might not know if the market even wants this product. And so we're putting all of this energy in trying to get it, going. And that's why we talk about MVP.
MVP. Right.
Least amount that we can test and then get, some
Get
traction
that
and
data.
get into that. that actual introductory phase. And then from there, we transition into the growth phase. So now we know that, hey, there's a market. People are buying our products. We're starting to scale a little bit. We're trying to say, okay, instead of producing 1, 2, maybe it's 10 to 20, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 1,000. Most of these numbers are relatively small, but you're growing. And then you reach that maturity. And so maturity is where people know who you are in your market or your industry. They're like, oh, hey, I know what Gloop is, or I know what Repkord is. You might not be perfectly mature at that. It's not a house name to everyone.
Right.
But what you've seen is that the industry knows who you are. You have a presence, you have a brand, you have established product, and now it's taking and growing this into essentially that bigger beast, if you will, of, okay, these are the widgets that we're producing. How do we produce them efficiently? How do we produce them effectively? One could argue that that's still kind of in the growth phase, but it's kind of these lines aren't perfectly drawn. There's no, oh, I'm now from growth into maturity. It's kind of a gray area where you just kind of naturally slip into.
Yeah.
And you're now kind of mature product, if you will.
Yeah. So I wanna pull in a comment that we got on the chat from Mayhall. He says,
Sure.
he's referring to basically talking about getting to maturity, defeating the purpose of 3D printing as a manufacturing tool. And he says, unless the goal is to stop iterating. I see what you're saying there, but I don't necessarily agree, especially as that tech evolves. That part of the reason we've invested heavily in like our belt printing, for example, is because I believe we can create a larger gap before we have to go to the next thing to scale.
Exactly.
So it just depends on what you're trying to do. My advice around this would be not to focus on your tool set as much as like identify where you are, because I will say, at a certain degree of scale, you may never achieve the level of scale for a given product where you even have to worry about that. 3D printing, CNC, laser cutting, a lot of this stuff allows us to, like I said, pivot quickly, to get it to market quickly, to get that valuable sales data, to understand if it is viable, excuse me, and then you can go from there. It doesn't mean that you have to do that all the way up to 100,000 units, 200,000 units, all that stuff.
Yeah.
At some point, you're going to need to potentially bridge that gap, but that's one of the good problems to have, as we say. And when you get to that level,
I would like to make the argument that we just had here a gentleman in the chat who's taken a product to maturity, who's leveraged 3D printing and still continues to leverage 3D printing.
Sure.
To produce products that are, I would consider, quite literally very mature. There's little iteration here or there, but
is his name
again,
Joe?
Maybe that rings a bell. But 3D printing is a tool, and it doesn't mean that you can't leverage it to continue manufacturing and hit a mature product using that manufacturing method. I think it in many cases it accelerates that process. So
it can, And I would argue too that the cost of taking a node-based approach, by that, like scaling a print farm, 3D printers are so cheap as a tool set as compared to industrial level injection molding machines. Like your capital expenditure to actually manufacture at large volume is so massive that it's like Prusa has proven out and continues to prove out that print farming is a viable means of mass production. It might not be the best, and if you've watched their products over the years, like we have, you'll notice they're starting to use more injection molded parts, but they're smart about it. They look and see what's the lowest hanging fruit for things that aren't likely to change, where we can farm that out, where we can free up capacity and make sure that we're leveraging the printers for the best parts, right? But again, don't get hung up on your tool. Okay, if you're looking at your product, I'm sure Joe's got a million ideas about how he wants to get to even the next level. And they're probably doing a lot of stuff that we're not even aware of right now. I know they are for a fact. They have a very robust R&D facility that are working on really, really cool stuff. And so, the problems that somebody that far in as a company like Prusa has is just feels like light years away from where we are as startups. But it can happen fast, and there is a method to the madness, guys. So don't get hung up on your tool set, though. I think that's a good piece. That's our response to that. So, okay, so we've talked about the life cycle. Okay, so like we said, minimum viable product, that's gets it out to market, get the thing listed on a website. Don't focus on, all these things that you don't need, like, baseline, like what's the minimum amount of, pictures, video, the barrier to entry is just smaller than ever before to get a product out there. I've said on Twitter in the past, and I will stand by this, that sales data is the best focus group there ever is. I would never spend money on a focus group. Those things seem so ridiculous to me. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for certain
or a survey or
surveys or whatever, because at the end of the day, you can survey all you want, you can ask people all you want, but there's a huge difference between somebody saying, "Oh yeah, that sounds great," and them cracking open their wallet and shelling out their hard-earned, guys. Stop with the surveys. Stop focusing on that. You can ask a question if you're trying to think about stuff and iterate, but that's basically the end you use. I'm going to get people arguing with me, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, sales data is the gold standard by which you should be validating your ideas, your products with, right? There is no replacement for that. It's a good idea. Absolutely. People will buy it. Right?
It's really that simple. That's what it comes down to.
Right.
I mean, you could have, other issues, like, again, as we're talking about this product market maturity, if you will, is an awareness issue. And you like to say, you don't have a marketing issue, you have an awareness issue. It comes down to, as you've developed your product, you reach that level of maturity where, people know who you are, and you are now, again, really relying on the machine that you've put all of this effort into building, just running and tuning and optimizing.
Right.
And this is also one of those areas where most, like, let's say startups, and I'll use startups in quotes, because there's no real defined area of which a startup becomes a company, or a company is no longer a startup. But this is where you'll see acquisitions happen, is in this maturity phase, usually just past the growth, or sometimes in mid maturity, because it's a well-oiled machine that now becomes an optimization problem for a larger organization that has the tools and the ability to just reduce manufacturing costs, or increase the productivity, or increase its distribution,
right?
All sorts of things. But this is where, ideally, as entrepreneurs, we want to hit, is that market maturity, or that product maturity,
right?
Because that means that we've kind of crossed that finish line.
Yeah. So I think you took a good stab at answering Chris Practical Printing's question in the chat. What defines, this is a good question though, if you're listening back, what defines when a manufacturer transitions from startup to an established company? Is it brand recognition? Is it product maturity? Is it product sales? It's a little bit of all of those things, I would say.
Absolutely.
Right? And what defines your maturity level as a company is not necessarily what defines a product maturity all the time. Now, when you're just getting started and you're known as one part, like to a lot of people, Repbox is Repkord and Repkord is Repbox, because that is like our flagship product. That is what we're known for. But as we develop more maturity and stuff like that, we're trying to position ourselves and to go beyond the Repbox. We've talked about not wanting to have all our eggs in one basket. And so I would echo what you say. I don't think that there's any clear delineation. I think that there's certainly defining metrics that say something like a venture capital company would use to like define where you are, like, and a lot of that's based on revenue and company size and growth and assets under management and all that stuff, right? So so there certainly is that. I feel like we still very much operate like a startup. We're very lean. We're very only a few people.
Exactly.
I don't know. How would you? It's a bit of a digression, but I'd be curious to know, like, how do you define, what are defining characteristics to a startup? Because a startup can obviously be one person in their home office, but that is a completely different world than like somebody that's got, a small investment and an actual place so how would you categorize business maturity like that?
Yeah. So I'm of the mindset that any size company can operate as a startup. A startup isn't a phase in a company's life. It's a mentality, a methodology,
Mm.
and a process that of which a company follows.
Mhm.
And you can be making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, heck, even billions of dollars a year, and still operate like a startup, still be very lean, very agile, and it just always testing, always iterating, always trying to get to that next best thing, if you will. And I think that startups, again, are scrappy and they're nimble. And, that's what comes to mind when I think of a startup. And then, you know, more prone to taking risks and placing some bets, because think about it, as an entrepreneur you're taking one of the biggest risks of your life. Potentially you're moving away from your job and you're trying to say, I'm going to go forge my own path. I'm going to go forge my own company. I'm going to try and make my own way. And you have to be scrappy. You have to be creative. You have to, be driven in order to be successful. And I really think that this is a methodology that defines what a startup is,
Hmm.
not a line in the sand of a dollar value or whatever. So that's my opinion.
I think that's a good point. I certainly think though at some point, if you're going to get tenure, you can be lean and agile and all that stuff and
Sure.
still be way
Hmm.
further down the road, right? At some point, you're not going to get
Hmm.
classified as what most people would. But I think your point is well taken that
Hmm.
it's a mentality piece, right? Like we want
Hmm.
to operate close. To me, I think about maybe what the organizational structure looks like, and it's like
Hmm.
how close is the founder owner to where the rubber meets the road a lot of the time,
Hmm.
right?
Yes.
And moving
Hmm.
away, because as an owner, a founder, owner, operator, we hopefully the goal becomes moving away from operator and more toward owner as you get mature,
Hmm.
right? Because to
Yep.
maintain the balance and sanity that you need,
Hmm.
you can't be in the trenches in the same way, right?
Hmm.
So
Yep.
I think there's a
Sure.
flatness to the organizational structure to me that helps define startup as well.
Sure.
I don't know. A couple of interesting points I wanted to touch on. Hack Monkey mentions he loves the survey. He's being sarcastic here. Loves the surveys. Which is better, A or B, with no option of C when they both suck. If the right
Hmm.
question is asked, the whole thing can be invalid, right? If you're giving people
Yep.
binary choices, you're getting possibly bad data because you're not giving people the ability to choose what ultimately might be the best choice, right? Because you either haven't thought of it or
Hmm.
you're too focused on the minutia. It just depends on
Hmm.
what your goals are. It reminds me of what's been in the zeitgeist a lot lately with the fallacy of the survivorship bias. Are you familiar with that?
I don't
So
think so.
so the survivorship bias is a really fascinating study. You guys should Google this because it's you'll see it a lot of times. We've seen it memeified in that airplane with a bunch of little holes in
Yes.
it, where
Hmm.
basically in World War II they were trying to get data about which where to put armor on airplanes based on which airplanes were coming back with holes and where on the airplane the holes were. So the whole point of that was there, if the plane's coming back and it's got holes in it, that means that's actually the non-critical part, because if it's hit,
Yes.
so your mind is thinking like, okay, plane comes back with holes all over the wings, the tail, the middle fuselage.
Hmm.
That's where the bullets are going, so we should put more armor there. But it's
Hmm.
backwards, right? Because when there's no bullets by where the cockpit is and all that stuff, the plane's not coming back at all, right? And so
Hmm. Yeah.
that's the whole notion of like, are you even asking the right question?
Hmm.
And it's really, really such a good little lesson when you're getting started and stuff like that. That our conception of how we should be asking questions and stuff are oftentimes distorted by the realities of it. I don't know. Go look it up. I love that. I
Sure.
love that meme.
Yeah.
We've seen that a lot these days. The other thing, Mahal Tech mentions he has a quick question. Last week he got his trademark approved. Congrats on that. That's a process. We've
Awesome.
still got one in process, and it's been almost a year now. Have you ever transitioned to a new name? He's trying to figure out how and when to rebrand. Man, we could do an entire
Yes.
bit on this.
Yep.
Well, first of all, have you ever gone through an actual rebrand? I know you've had multiple businesses, and as
We're
have
doing it right
I.
now. It's
Okay.
not a big rebrand, but we're doing
Okay.
it right now. I mean, you might see, like, if you go to our website, you might see some new imagery or new things. But what we're doing is we're rolling it out very slow, and our rebrand is not very big. If essentially it's dropping the 3D in front of Gloop,
You're just
but
Gloop.
it's a
The adhesive
slow,
formerly known as 3D Gloop is now just Gloop.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
eventually you'll
yeah,
transcend to just being a symbol. That's the way these
yeah,
things evolve. We know this
yeah,
from the
probably.
lessons of Prince.
But
Okay.
yeah. So it's, I wouldn't say there's any right way to do it, and we're probably doing it totally wrong. But we spent a lot of time like, oh, hey, what would be the best way to do this? Like, should we hire a marketing company to help us? Should we, do publication? Should we do, like a big splash and party? Like, it really just comes down to whatever you feel comfortable with.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish I had an answer, but
My
we're just kind of figuring it out ourselves.
my question I mean, I think the answer, like every answer, just comes back to it depends. What is my question back to you would be, what is the purpose of the rebrand?
Hmm.
Why did you feel the need to rebrand in the first place?
Hmm.
Because without kind of understanding that, it's hard to say, what the strategy might need to be. Um, and how dramatic of a rebrand is it? Like you're changing your name entirely, and how known
Yeah.
is the brand? I mean, like a lot of these things, like if Coca-Cola was all of a sudden to just rebrand and decide to call itself, bubble soda, uh, it like that's obviously got way different implications than just kind
Yep.
of changing the font of the logo and the color scheme and that kind of thing. So, um,
Yeah.
but I think that the reason we see those things happen is it gives an opportunity to tell a new story, to try to modernize, to try to reach audiences that you might not have reached before.
Hmm.
What was the
Well,
reasoning behind your rebrand?
and this is also a perfect segue into what happens after you've reached maturity. Let's say, for instance, you have a product that's reached maturity. There are companies out there that will do some rebranding of that product, or they will change things or add new features to extend its life cycle and reintroduce it to the market, without having to do all of the expensive R&D. So, in some cases, I think it's actually a really cool tie-in.
So, absolutely. I mean, it's a great question. We appreciate it. Mihao, I'm sorry I was pronouncing his name wrong. But thank you for submitting that. I think it's it's always going to be an interesting challenge, but hopefully you come to a new place, and I'm glad you got your trademark out there. I think there's a lot of little housekeeping things that
Mhm.
adds a lot of legitimacy to a brand and all that stuff too. So that's an exciting next step. Okay, so we've talked about kind of startup phase, and we've talked
Mhm.
about, okay, so what was next in the path
Yeah.
to maturity?
Yeah. Yeah. So after maturity naturally comes decline. And no one wants to hit that decline, because now it's like, well, you've invested all of this, energy into producing this widget, and you've been selling it, and you've been, reaping that reward. But now you're starting to see sales decline. People aren't as interested. You've hit market saturation.
You're
There's no new
questioning
customers.
questioning your purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We've
So
been there.
that's the general decline. Now, for tech things, there's always new tech coming out. So, the decline maybe the tech is now outdated, so no one wants to buy, an old camera, or a camera that doesn't have, the
Sure.
best, sensor on
The
it
latest
anymore.
greatest. Right. Right.
Exactly, exactly. So, you want to transition, you want to stay in, that market maturity without getting into that, decline. And so you revisit the product, you can add new features, you can update it, as I mentioned earlier, potentially rebranding and coming out as a new brand revitalizes the product or
Yes.
revitalizes its market maturity, and you're allowed to extend it a little bit.
Hmm.
Now there's a couple different things. Again, if you're looking at at a tech thing, at some point technology is going to get old and it's not going to work as well. It's not going to connect with the things that you need to. And
Right.
so again, this is kind of the end of the product life cycle. You can keep kicking that can down the road, but at some point new tech is always going to overcome the old tech.
People aren't going to
So,
buy the Bluetooth headsets that are on Bluetooth 3 when we're up to Bluetooth 5 or 6 or
mhm,
whatever it is now, right?
yeah,
So it's like
yeah.
that's a major,
Well, but
threat to tech based product, like, and you have to have
yeah,
baked in the
hmm
decline, right? And
yeah.
understanding what the key markers are of the decline. So my question
Well,
for you, sorry, real quick,
hmm
would be
go ahead, go ahead.
identifying and I think that this is a tricky one. I'll
Hmm
caveat, but identifying the difference between a dip and
hmm
a true decline, right? How do I know if I'm on the
Sure,
down slope of something that can recover? So we
sure.
talked about product where it's clearly like there will be a tailing off where we
hmm
reach maturity,
Yep,
but there are certainly products where it's like there's seasonal demand, and you don't, and when you're new you don't have enough data to understand
absolutely.
the life cycle or the demand cycle of your product, right?
Yep.
And so you don't want to misconstrue like what might be a temporary dip in demand with
hmm
an overall decline.
Sure, sure, and that can be really hard, especially for an entrepreneur or even a new business. But let's turn back essentially to that product life cycle. In the growth phase, of your product, you're going to be seeing a growing demand and an increase in its popularity, or people are adopting it, wanting it.
Mhm.
You might also start to see the first kind of direct copy or a competitor enter the marketplace. This is an indication where you haven't actually reached maturity yet. And so it's really about looking at the signs or the signals that the market is giving you. So while you might have a slow dip, like, or in the summer months, like for us, we have a slow dip, where people aren't printing as much or they're not using our products as much. And it's like, okay, well, have we reached saturation, or are people just not interested? But what you'll see is that other people are saying, oh, hey, like, look at this product or look at this. And you'll see other companies either coming in or trying to copy or trying to do similar things.
Right.
And that tells you that the market is still ripe and you're still in that growth phase.
Competitive
Um,
analysis could
exactly.
also
And
be its
so
own
even in
podcast. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
And you can even be in the maturity phase where you'll start seeing other products that are doing similar things. Maybe it's about price, because once you've hit maturity, it really largely becomes about price. Like, how can we produce these widgets for cheaper? And where, decisions are made from the customers like, "Oh, is this worth my $10,
Right.
or is it worth my $20, like, for the
Right.
name brand? Can I get a copy of it for slightly cheaper?"
Right.
And so that's really where I think, if you turn and look and see, are there copies being made, and if so, how prevalent they are, how many new copies are coming out, I think will definitely tell you, okay, you still have plenty of room to grow. And that's where more marketing, more awareness, more, just, doubling down on what you have is beneficial, because maybe
Absolutely.
you're not doing something else right.
I always,
So,
I always say there's two major indicators that we look at as entrepreneurs that we envision to be threats oftentimes
hmm
that are actually great indicators. And one is when your first major competitor starts to
hmm
pop up, and the other is the first time you're sued, probably.
yep.
So know when there's money to be made,
Yep.
there's going to be competition, and you need to be
Yes.
prepared for that fact. And if there is no competition, that should be an interesting indicator. It's not to say that novel ideas don't exist, right? Like,
hmm
there's still, I don't buy that everything significant, everything worth inventing
hmm
has been invented BS at all.
No.
That's been proven
hmm
so wrong for so long, right? That happens. Okay, but
hmm
you can't cloud it with thinking you're that unique that nobody else has thought of it and stuff like that. There may well be, when you're first getting
hmm
started, when you're first doing a business plan, if you don't write out a business plan, one of the first things you should be doing is doing some research to understand, does this even exist already? Because there's
Yep.
probably something out there that's, if not similar, like in that vein. Now, it may be new and novel, but then that puts you oftentimes in the tech space, right? Where it's like you've got some new technology that you're not always, but some new technology that you're leveraging. And that should also be an indicator to you that this is there's some really great opportunity. And if you can be the first mover on this thing,
yes,
that is a fantastic place to be. But know that if that technology, what are the threats? Do that SWOT analysis. I talk about SWOT analysis all the time. SWOT analyses all the time. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? So strength, first to market, first mover, new tech, great. Weaknesses, you're new. Maybe you don't have funding. Maybe you don't have enough resources, whatever. Opportunities, abound. Nobody else is doing this, all that, but you got to know what the size of your market is. Are you niche? Are you, is this something that if you were to put this thing up on Amazon, is it going to appeal to the masses, or is it only going to appeal to a small caveat of a small, so like we think about 3D printing as a niche, and then think about of the 3D printing community, look at that Venn diagram. How many are into cosplay? How many are into model, miniatures, whatever.
Miniatures,
so there's
model
niche
building,
and niche,
whatever
niche,
it might be,
right? And so you're going to get more motion probably the more niche you get. If you're a part of a community and you identify a need inside of there, that's great. But your weakness is that you don't have that massive reach. The more reach you tend to have, the more competition also exists, right? So it's always a balance. And then threats abound. Threats abound, right? So this may lose popularity. Like for us, like at some point, filament may not be spooled anymore, and so Repbox will ultimately hit a decline if pelletized 3D printing takes off, or new resin tech, or metals, or whatever, right? And so we're aware of that, and we're prepared for it. You don't ever know exactly where you are on that indicator line, though, on the dip and stuff, but the longer you've been in it, the more sales like I can it's all about filtering out that noise, right? So if I've got 3 years, 4 years of sales data, and I can do my year over analysis and look at that trend, I can tell pretty readily if I'm in a hump, or if I'm seeing massive decline from something, and then I start digging deeper, right? So it's all about getting to maturity so that you can get that data, guys, so that you can understand the problem and you can use business intelligence tools to its strength. But the road is perilous, and it takes time. It takes time.
Long time. Long time.
Wow. Okay. So
we covered a lot of ground.
Are we at maturity? I mean, like we said, depends on where you're at. Like if you survive all of these little, startup and growth and, going through, we've talked about the value of continual improvement kind of can retard that dip effect, that decline effect, right? So some strategies to mitigate that is versioning, right? Releasing new product that allows you to take advantage of, maybe you can keep 80% of your parts and do some upgrades that allow you to become relevant or maintain relevance, right? Maybe it's just a matter of updating your Bluetooth radio in the thing and to current standards, and now you're compatible with other stuff, right? That's don't have to change your case, don't have to change your other electronics boards, whatever.
Absolutely,
it just depends on what you are, right? But that's why we really love, like I said, leveraging these tools that allow us to do continuous improvement, because it allows us to maintain relevancy for longer. And the more you do it, the more you will start to realize what other opportunities are out there. You might start to decide, this product doesn't really have that many legs, but you're going to get a lot of ideas about what you might pivot to.
Exactly.
And we're always, that's one of the hallmarks of being an entrepreneur. You're always on the lookout for, what the opportunity costs are. Would I be better off sundowning this and developing this, right? No shortage of opportunity, guys. If you are in it, so there's a lot of positive here. I don't want to be doom and gloom. But sometimes it takes making some hard decisions, right? Sometimes it's hard to sundown your first product potentially. Like it will feel like the end of an era at times, but hopefully by the time that happens, you've got 5 other things that, and you're just that much stronger.
Absolutely.
So I
Yeah.
don't know. Does that wrap it all up in a nice bow? We
I
could, like I
think
said,
so.
always.
I think so. No, I think it's great. You did an awesome job.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think this is probably a good place to call it. We did a solid 60 here.
Yeah.
We still have a lot of prep work and stuff to do for IRF. For those of you that are in the
Oh.
chat that are going to be at the East Coast Rep Rap Festival in Bel Air, Maryland next weekend,
Mm-hmm.
shout out to you guys. If you're thinking about it, go. It is awesome. There are going to be a lot of amazing people there. Come meet
Mm-hmm.
us and plenty of other individuals. We look forward to seeing you at that.
Yes.
And if not, like I said, we'll be recording live from there. It will be streamed on the IRF, I believe on the IRF YouTube channel, but don't quote me on
that sounds right.
But we will also hopefully capture the recording and post to the podcast and stuff as normal. So there'll be a slight delay to our thing. We will not be live on our channel on Friday because we're going to record next Sunday live from IRF with Uncle Jesse for real, aka Clayton Parker. I'll bet you didn't know his last name was Parker, did you? You did, but I bet everybody else didn't know. Looking forward to seeing you all. Thank you for joining us as always. And as Never Let the Machines Win says in the chat, please like, subscribe, share the word, help us out. We really, really appreciate that. And we love you all. And we will catch you on the next episode of Maker That Money with Pooch and Andrew. Until then, have a great weekend, everybody.
See ya.
We'll see you soon.